I'm Michael Maloney, founder of Satellite Design for Recovery.
I'm Robbie Boundy, founder of Space Impulse.
I'm Alistair Funge, Space Policy and Operations Engineer.
And I listen to the Cold Star Project.
And I listen to the Cold Star Project.
And I listen to the Cold Star Project.
This show is for entertainment purposes only and is not what is termed professional advice. The Cold Star Project is proudly presented by the Operational Excellence Society. Cold Star Tech is a supporter of the OPEX Society, and Jason Kanigan is a member of its board of advisors. Talk with us at Cold Star Tech to find out what we can achieve together with your Lean Six Sigma or Operational Excellence programs. And check out opexsociety.org to learn more. Today's guest is John Bicknell. He comes to me through the Operational Excellence Society. This is very interesting, okay? He was a Marine. He's retired from that. And he is also an operations research professional. So that's a wonderful overlap with what we do at Cold Star Tech. All right. He founded more Cowbell Unlimited in 2018. And that is all about using predictive insights or developing predictive insights using human explainable cloud process technologies. Those are some big words. We're going to get into what that means in this interview. And you can use these things to predict behavior in industry and national security fields. And one field we will be looking at closely is space domain awareness, space situational awareness. Where are the things? And how do we know where they're going, right? Not always easy. So I really enjoyed this talk with John. It was a very relaxed chat, and we kind of went in some directions that I didn't know that we were going to go into. We ended up talking a little bit about geopolitics and space norms and things like that. So join us for a very interesting space industry conversation. John, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Jason. And so I'm a retired Marine, and I was fortunate enough to have a great Marine Corps career from 1990 to 2010. And while I was in the Marines, I got an advanced degree, which is operations research intensive. And I used that education while I was in the Marines for human resources supply chain analysis and to identify inefficiencies in the process of making Marines. That's not so much relevant to what I'm doing now, except I'm using those same skills in the space environment. And so a couple of years ago, I started my business, More Cowbell Unlimited. And what we do is we model processes, and then we use those process models to make predictions. And the technique is domain agnostic and it's data agnostic. And so over the course of my business trajectory, we got connected up with the folks at AFWorks, the Air Force Small Business Incubator, and started working with the Space Force. And so our project right now ongoing with the Space Force, and I look forward to telling you more about it, but it uses our process technologies to understand what's happening in the space domain so that we can predict what's likely to happen next. And so it's been a journey, but we're really excited for what we're doing with our space customer.
Well, very good. All right. I just switched the camera around because I noticed the thing was backwards. But okay, yeah. So you're a process guy, an operations research guy. I'm a process improvement guy, trained in an operations management guy, and I've dabbled in the operations research. And one of the connections that you and I have is through the Operational Excellence Society. And anybody who's interviewed by JP and who knocks on my door and says, "Hey, you got to meet this guy." Anybody says, "I want to meet," so
that's right, like a long lost cousin or something.
So good stuff. So I'm curious then what your take is on today's space environment. What does it look like to you? Is it friendly, hostile? What are we looking out for here?
Well, the way I think about it, so one of my favorite sayings is it's attributed to Samuel Clemens, Mark Twain. History does not repeat, but it rhymes. And so I look at what we're doing right now in space as precisely analogous to the discovery of the New World by Europeans, at least back in the late 1400s, early 1500s. Same thing, we are on the doorstep right now of something incredible and mysterious, and we don't exactly know what the future holds in store for us, but we have a feeling, a sense of adventure that it's going to be awesome. And so we are at the bleeding edge right now of discovering and learning more about this frontier. And so, just like back in the 1500s, intrepid individuals and teams of people and communities started developing on the shores of the new world. It's the same thing in the space environment. And um, so I don't think that human nature has changed in the last 500 or so years. I don't think human nature has changed in the last 10,000, 100,000 years. The same stuff that made up our ancestors is living inside of us right now. And so that's everything from this adventurous spirit to competitiveness to greediness to all of the good stuff and bad stuff that lived in our ancestors is living in us. And so I don't think that we should expect anything terribly different as different countries and people start venturing into space. And not too long ago, so this is early January of 2022, and I was marveling during 2021 as some of our famous billionaires have made their way into space on these short-lived but important journeys into space, and there was so much criticism with about these people,
Right.
like, oh, I can't believe this billionaire is doing this. That's already been done, and blah blah blah. I think that is so short-sighted. I mean, I was befuddled as to how short-sighted some of that commentary was. I I I believe that space is actually going to solve a whole lot of the problems that we perceive to be problems today. Things like, oh, people talk about global warming, and there's no doubt to me that the environment is changing. Maybe it's warming. Okay, fine. Let's call that a problem. But I think that space is going to help solve that problem. We talk about overpopulation. I think space is going to help solve that problem. We have medical challenges. I think space is going to provide platforms for us to develop medical advancements and technologies that we just can't even fathom right now. So anyway, that's how I think of space. It's like there are so many possibilities, and we would be extremely short-sighted not to try to be on the leading edge of all that. And I'm sorry, one last thing. So I've got daughters. I've got two girls. One is almost 30, and the other is 15. I mean, I tend to be an optimist, and so for the next generation, the youngsters today, I mean, my girls they've got front row seats to the unfolding of what's happening in space, and I mean I just can't think of a better time to be alive and to be witnessing what people are capable of doing.
Right. Well, John, that's an interesting perspective, analogous to 1492 plus, era.
Yeah.
Hopefully not conquest, but I think your idea of, look, people are going to be just as stupid, greedy, short-sighted, and lazy as they ever have been when it comes to space. Some are not. There's always early adopters, right? Maybe the Spanish and the Portuguese and the British or something, who are running out there to see what they can do and see if they can find a different passage or something like that to get around to what they conceive of as valuable. But then the organizing principle will probably also change. We in the last 150 years or whatever, we saw one go from coal to petroleum, right? And in space, who knows, right? Maybe we'll find some other element or some other material, or just the ability to construct things up there will somehow be cheaper, better, faster, and transform how we do what we do. We really don't know yet. And we're in that probing phase right now of, okay, well, hey, Mr. Columbus or Leif Erikson or whoever it happens to be, right?
Right,
You've
right.
discovered a thing. You're exploring the thing and the edges around it. All right, I don't know what it's good for yet, but now one difference that I do see though is there's no existing populations out there with Aztec or Mayan gold or something like that we're going to go and take or enslave or anything like that. So there is a slight difference there, but I'll bet you there is some kind of resource out there that we'll discover that will become very important that we haven't run into yet, and it's hard to predict what that sort of thing is, right?
Absolutely right. But yeah, I agree with you. There's going to be something discovered out there which will be new and valuable. And yeah, we're not sure what that's going to be, but also all the things that we currently value in terms of minerals and elements, all of that, I believe, exists in essentially infinite quantities. And so we'll be able to eventually, I mean, it's prohibitively expensive or technically challenging or both now to do this, but it won't be that way forever.
Right. What frustrates me, John, is that it comes down to one person seeming to need to take the punch to the face to do the initial thing, with reusable rockets. We know who that's been. And then, oh yeah, obviously you can do that now, and everyone can do that now. We've seen it done, right? But go back to 2010 or 2000 and let's talk about it, right? From that perspective.
Right. It's kind of
people believe.
It's kind of like the 4-minute mile. It was it was this invisible mental physical barrier, but once the first person did it, then all of a sudden, Katie barred the door, and lots of people were all of a sudden able to break the 4-minute mile. So there's a little bit of mental mindset that is related to this, just believing that it can be done, but then also having the ability to resource it and assembling the right team, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of pieces that have to come together, but people are the best sense-making machines ever, as far as I know. So where there's a will, there's a way.
Right. Yeah, I mean, folks, John's paradigm thinking training is coming through there. Go look up your Roger Bannisters or the first person to jump backwards over a pole vault pole or something like that, right? Instead of jumping forward over top of it. People have come in and, wow, that's crazy, right at the beginning, or you can't do that. And then suddenly that's the standard way we do it now. And why would, you're crazy to not do it that way. I get very nervous about the fashion of the moment. And at that, the impact of that on activity and energy put into things in space. And it's true everywhere. This is another of those parts of human nature. Over the last couple of years, for example, I've watched a topic that we'll get into, space domain awareness, space situational awareness.
Yeah.
Go the space junk problem, right? Go from, oh, shut up, to, oh, my goodness, we really need to do something about this, right? And okay, yeah, we did throw up quite a few more satellites, but still, right? The environment didn't change that much, right? Our thinking about it did.
Right. Yeah. Back to human nature, it does seem to be a persistent, I don't know whether it's a feature or a bug. It depends on who you ask, when you ask, but the collective we do seem to wait until a problem becomes painful enough before we decide to do something about it. The case study that I remember reading when I was in graduate school, it was something about the city of Chicago. Back in the 1800s, they had this pipe that first of all, people would just dump their trash and their human waste right there into Lake Michigan. And it's the way they've always done it, right? No big deal. Here you go. Just drop it right on in there. Problem solved. And then after a while, people started getting sick. And it took some genius to be like, I wonder if it's because we've been polluting the water. Like, I know what we'll do. We'll put a pipe in the water to bring our drinking water from further out in the lake. right? So rather than just siphoning it up right from the shores where it was polluted, you put it out a little bit further, and then hey, we can and then we don't have to change our ways. We can keep doing it. And then it was like they kept doing that a couple of times. It's like, oh, now the water's polluted 50 yards out instead of just right next to the shore. And so anyway, the point is, it seems like problems have to become vivid enough before we do something about it. It's probably it may be that way with space debris too.
I think so. But the fashion is catching on, but still, then who's going to pay for it? People will pay for it, as you say, after there's been a problem. I know Franklin Roosevelt coming up, governor of New York or something. There was I think a garment fire, factory fire that killed a lot of kids or something, and then suddenly this is a problem, and we need to put in safety regulations in the state. This sort of thing happens a lot where people need to die almost, and it goes to fiction too. Arthur Clarke's Rendezvous with Ramos, I think, starts off with a city getting wasted by a meteorite coming in, and I guess we better point something out at the stars then. And so and that was from the 50s, right? This was not a new thing. So so we've got this kind of funny human environment that's plastered on top of what the reality is out there, right? Of all these spinning things out there in space and competing governments, organizations wanting to make use of that. China and the US probably being the top two right now. What's your perspective on the US military and space? How important is space to us and also maybe our opponents, and what should we do about it?
Yeah, well, I think that space is integral to being able to bring our instruments of national power to bear on various different challenges, and for us to compete in this in today's world. But I think that for our Space Force, or for the, if we could talk maybe just the U.S. government for just a second, I think that maybe our first most important project is to set the conditions of space operations so that our rules and our norms are somehow encoded into the space environment. That, I mean, if that does not happen, then everything else that we do in space is going to just become that much harder. And so the wanting the United States and the West in general to remain the leader of the international rules-based system, I think, is job number one. And so I'm bringing another analogy into this discussion, but it's like the Wild West right now. Anything goes, and so we're trying to overlay into the Wild West, some rules that make sense to us and to our friends and allies, and to try to make sure. So I think that's rule number, project number one. And then number two, I look at the Space Force as being analogous to the United States Navy, and the Navy's original mission, which it still has, is to keep the sea lanes open for commerce. And so the Space Force, I think, is going to be adopting the same mission and mindset, is that part of their mission is to make sure the free flow of information and navigation, and the ability to maximize the possibilities of commerce in the space environment. And so we have to assume that we have a well-resourced, adaptive, and technologically advanced adversaries that are going to be trying to impose their will on us. And so all of this can be put under the bumper sticker that you hear today, which is, sometimes people think it's just kind of like a platitude, but I think it's really true that we are back in a world of great power competition, and China is the pacing threat, and we need to take it seriously. And China's making advances in the space domain, and we need to get ahead and stay ahead of what they're doing.
Okay. Well, you make some good points there. Just thinking about it in terms of the Navy, we, I think the battleground has shifted. We don't have Libyan pirates in the Mediterranean disrupting trade the way they were in the 1800s, right? Needing to be wiped out. Folks, learn your history. There's some really good documentaries on YouTube about this stuff. But we do have a cyber security issue, right? Where we're open to attack, and folks like Nick Shalon are, leading the charge on dealing with that. And it's not as easy to see. I can't point at ships, right? But there's this insidious thing going on out there where many of our infrastructure systems are open to being hacked through little apps or something that got made in 1994. And the code is still there operating, and everybody uses this thing and nobody thinks about it. And it's just a piece of technological glue, right, that's hooking things up together, but they can hack in that way and start knocking us over. So our Space Force may need to be involved in that area just as much as putting a physical thing up in the way of physical things of our opponents, right?
Yeah, totally. If I can make just one kind of like foot stomp that point. Yes, for sure. We, the West, the United States, have built this exquisite technology stack, and we did it, let's say over the last 30 or 40 years, when there were relatively few other nations or bad actors in the world that could access the back ends of this technology. So we built it without that kind of security mindset in mind. And for a long while, it served us very well, and no one could touch us. But now, like you said, anybody with who can spend some time on YouTube and take a few Udemy courses or whatnot, all of a sudden you're a hacker. And all of our critical infrastructure, not just spaceborne, but even terrestrial critical infrastructure, is like Swiss cheese. And so now we've got this massive project of figuring out how to retrofit all of that with adequate security, and then also building the next generation with exquisite security in mind.
Yeah, and to those who might say, Jason, you're being a Chicken Little, the sky's falling. No, this kind of break-in has already happened.
Yeah,
it has happened. It is not a theoretical. About enforcing and setting norms, though, John, this is a tough one. I come at it from two directions. It's like you cannot wait for the United Nations to impose something from up high. It's going to take forever, right? There's not quite enough operator activity to enforce it from below. The space lawyers are in the middle and they chirp. They have a lot to say, right? But I find that there's no mass or anything that goes to and gathers around yet. I don't know. I think back, I think Michael Mealing brought this up about California, minor 49er types who went out there and got into that gold rush, and there was no state protection or law enforcement or anything, and they ended up creating their own courts and meting out justice. That wasn't necessarily a lynch mob, but actually had some organization to it. But it wasn't government backed, right? The operators got together and did that. What's your sense of how are these norms going to get set and enforced? Then you say you want us to, the West, to be able to be the ones who do it, and I agree that's probably a good thing, but how?
Great question. I'm not a normologist. I just think that it has to be somehow put onto the agenda. But I like your example of the Wild West, and I mean, so there's 3 billionaires who are making moves in space, or at least 3 that I'm aware of. There's probably lots of other folks, but Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and Richard Branson, right? From my perspective, fortunately, all of those gentlemen are products of the West, even if they didn't all grow up in the United States, Elon Musk and Richard Branson, for example. But they have encoded in them the kinds of values of capitalism and free spirit, freedom, period, full stop, libertarianism, which I think whatever they wind up developing in space, those types of foundational values will be a part of whatever their operations wind up being. And I don't think it would be a bad thing at all somehow for our Space Force and our government to collaborate with people like that, and so that when the time comes and there are assets up in space that need to be protected, if they're public-private assets or even just private assets, there will be security personnel who are part of those operations, which again have encoded in them values that we appreciate, even if they're not precisely the kinds of laws and rules that we would have terrestrially. So I don't know. Okay. I mean, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not sure how all that would go down. I'm sure that there's people in your audience that could take all kinds of shots at what I was just saying, but that kind of thing makes sense to me. Whatever it is, it's going to be emergent, and it's not. All we can do is set the intention of this kind of a project, and then let the project emerge on its own with some kind of reassurance that it'll evolve in a way that that aligns with our values.
Okay, so having the people work on it who share these values is probably a really great start to get the right kind of energy going in there. And I'm sure
well said. Yes.
There's tons of space lawyers out there who have a pop-up sheet of things. It's like, look, we already got this. We're ready to go. Just but that has to get into the hands of an organization with power to enforce it, right? Number one. We've talked about renewed great power competition. I was reading China had just recently said, yep, we're going to have a moon base and operate there and that kind of thing. Sometimes I worry, right? We're a little bit behind on this stuff. I don't see our plans for doing so. There is a bit of a first mover advantage, I think, here, because you're just there to begin with. And then there's another side to this too, which is the unexpected, right? We can plan out all we want, but there are going to be, and there always is, right? Whether it's a terrestrial process or something, right? As soon as you make the thing go live, users use the system differently than you expected. Pieces interact, particles interact differently. That a particle could be anything. It could be an email or something, but they interact differently than what you expect. And then you're like, oh, I didn't even think of that. Right. This happens in other businesses that I run every day. And then you've got to develop norms around that. So are there any experiences that you have, and I'm putting you on the spot here, that jump to mind that you might want to share with us about process and system situations like that, where you were working on something, it looked good in the lab, so to speak, and then once you put it into action, people did something weird with it, right, that you didn't expect?
Well, yeah, you're taking a page right out of the process mining playbook, and I didn't mention this at the top, but the capability that my firm deploys is called process mining. You're probably familiar with it, Jason. But for those in your audience who are not familiar with process mining, it was developed originally in the Netherlands, academia, over the last, say, 20 years. But it started making an exit from academia maybe 15-ish years ago into the European manufacturing sector. But what process mining does is it interrogates system event logs. And event logs are part of every IT system. You can have the event logs spit out, what the system is actually doing. And if you're clever about recording the event logs and analyzing them, you can identify footprints or traces of human and machine activity within those event logs. And so that's what process mining does. And so it's a foundational capability that is part of things like digital transformation and other process improvement projects. I'm sure there's plenty of folks in your audience, yourself too, Jason, been a part of some kind of a process improvement project. And step number one is always like, okay, gang, let's everybody get into the conference room and let's start whiteboarding out what this process looks like, right? Well, first Jimmy does this and then Sally does that. And you have this, subjective stick and wire diagram of what people think the process looks like. And so, but process mining is a more objective examination of processes. And so you might, after interrogating these event logs, a process model surfaces, but you might be able to see in there, like what you were describing, Jason, you might be able to see the core process that this is what we think we're doing, right? A, B, C, X, Y, Z, and we have some branches and stuff like that. That's what we think we're doing. But when you take a look at the actual process models, more often than not, you see all kinds of deviations and rework steps. And oh my goodness, I didn't even realize that that was possible. I thought that we had the system coded so that these types of things were not even allowed. Well, sure enough, somehow the electrons sneak around the coding and are able to circumvent steps. And so it becomes a way for organizations to see what is really happening so that they can put in process improvements which are more informed by data than by gut feel. But then you can also use it to monitor processes for compliance purposes. Like if a step is skipped or circumvented or not done properly, people go to jail, especially in finance and medicine and stuff like this, right? And so it's a technique that's being deployed increasingly throughout the business world to help get some more efficiencies and to help people stay out of jail and make process improvements.
Right.
And so, so we're taking that technique and we're applying it to other domains. But that's how I would respond to your point there about process deviations. Happens all the time.
Yeah, folks. The senior managers, the executives, the leadership, founders of companies, worked with them for 20 years.
Yeah,
have this mental movie running of what they think is happening out there, and you can get to sit down and you can sit down with the people and flowchart this stuff. There's an operation, an inspection, a decision, whatever, right? And that's great. And then what we do is we run a kind of a die pack through that where we can watch where did this actually go, right?
Yeah.
And there's always deviation. And the deviation is where the inefficiency is, right? And where the improvements are possible, right? And so then when we correct that process map and that we're all on the same page now of like, oh, this is what's actually happening, we celebrate that moment. Because now for the first time, that organization, those people know really what's happening. And so your data mining thing is very interesting because with logs, we've got say security, people opening and closing doors, right? We can watch that kind of thing, and maybe traffic patterns come out of that, right? Oh, I didn't know that they'd go down here at 8 o'clock at night. What are they doing, right? That may lead to further questions, right? Of failure logs, error logs, right? Will tell us where, like the help desk of online coaching programs, for example. The help desk area is a great way to get that kind of feedback about how people are actually using the system and where it's breaking, right? And then bring that back to where can we do something to improve the situation. So my takeaway from what you've said, John, then is that system is all well and good, that problem solving system. But what we need actually now is a lot of data. We need some data, right? Our chief data scientist tells me, Jason, we don't need much. We need about 800 data points to start being able to pull something useful out of business to business transactional stuff, for example, right? But you need some data. And so that takes me back to, okay, well, now we really do need operators out there, hopefully not in conflict, right?
Right.
But engaging, right, and doing things in that. So I wonder how long it's going to take to develop a sort of a data cloud or a data, not a lake, but just a pool of data out there to draw from. Are we going to have to wait 20 years?
I don't think so. I mean, well, there's more time stamped data being generated today than ever in the history of ever. But it's whether or not the data are being corralled and placed somewhere for people to access. And so, businesses have lots of different systems. Most of the systems they don't own. They're services that they're purchasing, and so so for an organization to be able to model their entire business, that is a massive project, which involves the collaboration with a whole bunch of various different service providers. And so, tough to do, but it's doable. I always advise businesses to, start with whatever the burning platform is, or the big blinking red light, or, there is some subjectiveness to it. And so some champion has to be able to say, well, this is where we think that we would get the most bang for the buck for some kind of a process improvement effort, and, start there.
All right. Yeah. Well, the methodology that I was taught, we were taught a it's consistent problem-solving process that you're probably aware of, called SHRED'em, which begins with select, and that is choosing what to work on, right? And that was the most difficult thing. Everybody wanted to rush to the second thing, which is record the data of what's actually happening, do the flow chart and get the logs, stuff like that. But start with select. So, let's
make a decision.
Yeah. Let's talk about space domain awareness then for a second. We kind of touched on it earlier. We've got this truly new frontier. Great powers getting out there. We're creating some more data every moment by interacting in it. Why is this important to you? Let's begin with that.
Yeah. Well, the way I look at space domain awareness, and so bringing in the previous discussion about process mining. I look at it as a problem that is custom made for John Boyd and the OODA loop. I don't know whether you've had people talk about the OODA loop at all on your podcast yet, but
occasionally,
yeah. Okay.
But go ahead. Let's assume everybody has not listened to every episode.
Right. Sure. Yeah, of course. So as a retired Marine, I was born and raised with maneuver warfare and John Boyd and the OODA loop. But John Boyd was an Air Force pilot in the 50s, 60s, and early 70s. But he was the person whose thought leadership created the OODA loop, and he's got a really cool paper. I don't know if you put links in your show notes, Jason, but it's a really accessible paper back from like 1976. It's called Destruction and Creation, and in this paper is the foundations of what eventually the Marine Corps wound up adopting as a lot of its maneuver warfare principles and disciplines. But he says in this paper that people in general, it doesn't matter whether you're an individual, a family, a small community, or a nation state, really what everybody is trying to do all the time is improve their own capacity for individual action. And the kinds of things that I tell my kids are, it's like, okay, you're getting ready to make a decision here, and you need to be asking yourself, is this decision going to increase your options, or is it going to limit your options? And if you think about that, that is really what we are doing with the Space Force relative to space domain awareness and competing in the space environment. And it's all about better, faster decision making. And there's some core assumptions contained within Boyd's work, and he actually cites some big brain thinkers like Gödel and Heisenberg, and he even talks about the second law of thermodynamics and entropy as part of the OODA loop. But what all this kind of boils down to is, one, you have to assume that you are never going to have a full picture. You're never going to have all the data. It never will, and that's Gödel's theorem, actually. And then on top of that, whatever data you do have, you have to assume that it's not perfect. There's all kinds of measurement error. The enemy is trying to deceive you, so you have to assume that there's uncertainty in the data that you do have. And then finally, about the second law of thermodynamics, it states something like, if you have a closed system and you leave that system alone, then that system will wind up decaying. And you can think about like a piece of fruit, like a banana. If you leave a banana on the counter and you just leave it alone and you come back in a week, that banana has decayed. And so that's entropy. And so you have to assume that, whatever system you're examining, if you get a picture of that system today, then that system will have changed tomorrow. And so you can kind of see how this starts forming the OODA loop. You have to constantly be gathering new data. You have to constantly be tearing that data apart and reassembling it, and then doing it again and again and again and again. And that is the OODA loop. And so that's what we're doing with the Space Force. Is we're working currently with two-line element sets, TLEs, to bring those in. And by the way, I have to give just like a big shout out to another company that we're working with, Spectrobotics, which is out of Colorado Springs. We're partnered with them on this, and without them, we wouldn't be doing this. So, but we're constantly bringing in TLEs. We're examining orbital dynamics and looking for patterns to be able to understand maneuvers on orbit, and putting those into process models so that you can see the different processes associated with different regimes of interest. And so we're looking at the geobelt, and there's like 500 different objects on the geobelt spread around at different longitudes, somewhat uniformly around the geobelt. So we're looking at different longitudes and the processes of maneuver at various different longitudes. And we're also looking at process models of satellites by country and by ostensible mission, like a comms mission or a GPS mission or a weather mission. And so we're looking at the geo-orbital regime from all kinds of different perspectives. And we're doing it continually, creating new process models and being able to make near-term predictions of what is likely to happen next. And all of this goes right into the whole notion of being able to improve our capacity for independent action, so that we can understand what is the enemy likely to do next, so that we can either deny them some kind of a imaging opportunity, but understand what they're likely to do next as well, so that we can get ahead of and stay ahead of what they're doing on orbit.
Okay, I'm amused by a couple of thoughts. One, the teenager, should they will this decision limit their activities or increase? Should Space Force sneak out of its bedroom at night to be with its boyfriend or girlfriend? Will that limit its options? Are you able to look at say orbital paths of an opponent's satellite and predict, like, well, they said this was an observation satellite or something, but maybe it's actually got a military use or something? Are you able to pull any intention out of that?
We're getting there, actually. Okay. We rummaged through the archives and found a old paper from the early 1960s that has a really cool algorithm that we were able to adapt for some of these purposes. So yeah, we are looking at doing just that. But this algorithm, what it does is it identifies in an abstract distance measure how far away objects are from one another. And I say it's abstract because it's possible for an object to be relatively far away in a Cartesian distance sense, like miles or kilometers. It could be very far away, or you would think it would be, but in abstract or energy distance, it's actually relatively close, meaning it wouldn't take a whole lot of delta V or a whole lot of energy input into that object, and then zoom, all of a sudden you're right next to that object. So
Okay.
the answer to your question is yes, we're working towards that.
Okay, that was an unprepared question, folks. I just thought of it while he was talking.
Yeah.
In the last
Yeah, no,
little bit.
that's something that our space customer is very much interested in. And we're working, by the way, with the Delta 9 Orbital Warfare Group and one of their squadrons, OneSops, and those guys and gals are they are actually the maneuver warfare nexus for the Space Force. And so, yes, they are very interested to understand the processes, the activities which are near their assets. And so, as I was just describing, near has different interpretations.
Relative. Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Well, John, we've got a few minutes here. Let's finish up with this. Who do you want to meet? Who would you like reaching out to you, and what kind of projects would you like to be working on with them, if you have the capacity to even take on any more?
Yeah, thanks for asking that, Jason. I'm interested to talk to any commercial company that wants to improve their situational awareness. The techniques that we're developing, as I was been describing here, are custom made for organizations to understand the ecosystems that they navigate in. It can be their own competitive corporate ecosystem, or some other kind of an ecosystem of interest to a business. But anybody who wants to know what is happening within an ecosystem and what is likely to happen next, and how they can exploit that information for their own business gain, those are the types of organizations that would benefit from the techniques that we've developed.
Excellent. And what's the best way to reach you? Is it through LinkedIn or a website?
Yeah, LinkedIn is good. I'm very responsive on LinkedIn. John Bicknell, more Cowbell Unlimited.
Right.
You got to have more cowbell.
All right. Well, John, thanks a lot for doing this. It was pretty insightful.
Awesome, Jason. Thanks for having me.
So thanks for joining us for a very interesting conversation on developing insights into space domain awareness. And I really recommend you check out the More Cowbell website. Also, go have a look at the new coldstartech.com website. We are very interested in speaking with people who are in space and defense companies and wanting to develop a commercial program. If you're an SBIR or an OTA, and you've got to figure out what that path to commercialization is, and you're just stuck, like, I don't know what to do, come talk to us. We'll help you out with that. You can book a time to speak with me on the website, coldstartech.com. Thanks for joining us today. I look forward to talking to you again soon.